Welcome to Mizzima's Talk 3-Year Fight for Freedom. Today marks the third anniversary of the military coup in Myanmar. On this day, 3 years ago, arrests and huntings of activists started in pre-dawn hour, followed by an internet and phone line cutout in Myanmar. The coup then sparked widespread non-violent protests across the country after the military responded with the brutal force that protesters turned into armed uprising. Ethnic armed organizations fighting for autonomy also joined with the anti-coup groups in the war that has since reached a large scale in Myanmar history. The resistance force desired to overturn Myanmar military-dominated political system and establish a federal democracy that grants the right to self-determination for its ethnic minority. In this live program, we will discuss the country's security affairs, human rights situation, and the role of an international community. Before we start the discussion, I want to show you one video message, one video report about the victories of the resistance force, and a soundbite of Chin National Front CNF. Please take a look.
Hi, greeting all solidarity from the Asia Democracy Network. Our heart goes to the people of Myanmar who to this day endures suffering and difficulties brought about by the Tatmadaw and their failed coup. The heroes of our times, Myanmar democracy and human rights activists. We thank you for your bravery and sacrifice along the years. As a comrades bonded by the spirit of democracy, you have our admiration for the continued resilience and resistance. Amid these very challenging years, we are one with you. It has been 3 years since the junta seized power illegally. The human rights situation in Myanmar has steadily worsened, with almost all the institutions of democratic governments captured and the brutal crackdowns on civilians shown no sign of slowing down. The Tatmadaw has chosen violence at every step, and they have created place where anyone can be attacked by any expressions of dissent. And yet the people of Myanmar who have yearned for and learned to love a democratic way of life had not given up their resistance despite great life risks. The junta will continue to ignore the world condemnations of their inhumane action as long as the world illiberal countries and their agents continue to back them up. I feel it is very essential as allies of democracy to shore up support for the movements within Myanmar, as well as to intensify international pressure to not prolong the people's suffering. The world democratic community should be unwavering in demanding accountability from the junta for the injustice and bloodshed they cause. It is all our duty to elevate and rethink of a more effective way in assisting the restoration of Myanmar democracy. As we in ADNs, we wanted to continue to offer in anywhere we can to support and to facilitating this. As we have done in the past, ADN will continue or hoping to continue to engagements with specific group and individual inside and outside Myanmar who are pursuing this collective cause. We continue to believe, I personally continue to believe, there is a bright light in this long dark tunnel. We should stay with the people of Myanmar in these challenging times. I offer our spirit, our solidarity, and sharing the bonds in promoting and defending democracy together with the people of Myanmar in solidarity.
အာနာသိန်းစားမှာစစ်သွေးစစ်မှန်တက်ကြွနေတဲ့စစ်ကောင်စီတပ်တွေဟာအာနာသိန်းမှုကိုစန့်ကျင်သူတွေခုခံတော်လှန်သူတွေအပေါ်ရက်ဆက်ကြမ်းကြုတ်ဆုံးနီလန်းတွေနဲ့ဖိနှိပ်ခဲ့ပါတယ်။ဒါပေမဲ့ပြည်သူလူထုနဲ့တော်လှန်ရေးလက်နက်ကိုင်အဖွဲ့တွေရဲ့ခုခံမှုအချိန်ကာလကြာမြင့်လာတဲ့အမျှစစ်ကောင်စီရဲ့တပ်တွေဟာစိတ်တက်ရှိရာပြက်ပြားလာပါတယ်။အထူးသဖြင့်2023အောက်တိုဘာ29ရက်နေ့မှာမြောက်ပိုင်းညီနောင်မဟာမိတ်၃ဘွဲ့ရဲ့10-20စစ်စင်ရှိရဲ့စနစ်ကျတဲ့ထိုးစစ်တွေကြောင့်စစ်ကောင်စီတပ်စခန်းတွေအတုံအယုံပြိုလဲခဲ့ပါတယ်။အချိန်ကိုက်လှုပ်ဆောင်ခဲ့တဲ့ကရင်နီပြည်နယ်က17စစ်စင်ရေးရခိုင်ပြည်နယ်ကရခိုင်တပ်တော် AA ရဲ့စစ်စင်ရေးကရင်ပြည်နယ်မွန်ပြည်နယ်နဲ့တနင်္သာရီတိုင်းက KNU ရဲ့စစ်စင်ရေးစကိုင်းနဲ့ကချင်ပြည်နယ်ကစစ်စင်ရေးတွေကြောင့်စစ်ကောင်စီအနေနဲ့မြို့ကြီးအတော်များများကိုလက်လွတ်ဆုံးရှုံးခဲ့ရပါတယ်။တပ်စခန်းစွန့်ခွာထွက်ပြေးသူလက်နက်ချအညံ့ခံသူကြာဆုံးသူအရေးအတွက်လည်းတနေ့ထက်တနေ့ပိုများလာပါတယ်။မှတ်တမ်းတွေအရဆိုရင်စစ်စင်ရေး10-20စတင်ခဲ့တဲ့အချိန်ကာလကနေအခုအချိန်ထိ MNDAA ကစစ်စခန်းပေါင်း250ကျော်သိမ်းပိုက်ခဲ့ပါတယ်။ TNL ကတပ်စခန်းပေါင်း84ခုရခိုင်တပ်တော် AA ကစစ်စခန်းနဲ့ရဲတပ်ရင်းစခန်းပေါင်း148ခုသိမ်းပိုက်နိုင်ခဲ့တဲ့အတွက်စစ်ကောင်စီတပ်တွေလက်လွတ်ဆုံးရှုံးခဲ့ရတဲ့တပ်စခန်းပေါင်း490ကျော်ရှိပြီဖြစ်ပါတယ်။ဒါအပြင်မြောက်ပိုင်းညီနောင်၃ဘွဲ့အနေနဲ့10-20စစ်စင်ရေးကာလထဲမှာရှမ်းမြောက်ဒေသကမြို့ပေါင်း10မြို့ကျော်ကိုသိမ်းပိုက်ထားပါတယ်။လောက်ကိုင်မှာဗိုလ်မှူးချုပ်အဆင့်6ယောက်အရာရှိအဆင့်228ယောက်အပါအဝင်အကြက်တပ်သားစုစုပေါင်း2395ယောက်လက်နက်ချခဲ့တဲ့ဖြစ်စဉ်ကတော့စစ်တပ်သမိုင်းမှာမကြုံဘူးတဲ့အကြီးမားဆုံးလက်နက်ချမှုဖြစ်ပါတယ်။ဒီလိုစစ်ရေးရှုံနိမ့်မှုတွေကြောင့်အခုဆိုရင်စစ်တပ်ကိုထောက်လျှောက်ထောက်ခံခဲ့တဲ့သူတွေတောင်ဗိုလ်ချုပ်မှုကြီးမင်းအောင်လှိုင်နှုတ်ထွက်ပေးဖို့လူသိရှင်ကြားတောင်းဆိုလာတဲ့အထိဖြစ်လာပါတယ်။
3နှစ်တာတော်လှန်ရေးကာလမှာကျွန်တော်တို့ချင်းတောင်စီရဲ့အခြေအနေကခုချင်းတောင်ဟာမြို့နယ်9မြို့နယ်ရှိတဲ့ထဲမှာဒီမြို့ရှိမြို့ကတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ကမသိသိနိုင်သေးဘူးနောက်ပြီးတော့ကျဲတဲ့ဒေသတွေမှာစခန်းသိမ်းတာ12ခုပြီးတော့သူတို့ရဲစခန်းတပ်စခန်းရုပ်သိမ်းတာက14ခုဆိုတော့ချင်းတောင်တစ်ခုလုံးအနေထားနဲ့ပြောရရင်စီရေးအနေထား100မှာ85ရာခိုင်နှုန်းတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ရဲ့ထင်းချုပ်မှုအောက်မှာရှိတယ်ထင်းချုပ်မှုဆိုတဲ့နေရာမှာသူတို့ဘက်ကမြို့တစ်မြို့နဲ့တစ်မြို့အထိုင်စခန်းတွေချိတ်ဆက်မှုကျွန်တော်တို့ဖြတ်တောက်နိုင်ခဲ့တယ်နောက်ပြီးတော့မှဒီမြို့ပြင်ကနဲ့သူတို့ကလုံးဝအပြင်ထွက်လှုပ်ရှားနိုင်တဲ့အနေအထားမရှိတော့ဘူးဆိုတော့100မှာ85ရာခိုင်နှုန်းကတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ရဲ့ထင်းချုပ်မှုအောက်မှာရောက်နေတယ်လို့ပြောလို့ရတယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့တပြည်လုံးတိုင်းတာနဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့စီးရေးအခြေအနေကိုသုံးသပ်မယ်ဆိုရင်ဒီရခိုင်နှစ်အောက်တိုဘာနိုဝင်ဘာကလေးကအရှေ့မြောက်ညီနောင်သုံးဖွဲ့ဒီနေဦးတော်လှန်ရေးမှာပါဝင်လာတဲ့နောက်ပိုင်းအင်မတန်မှထူးခြားတဲ့အနေအထားကျွန်တော်တို့စီးရေးအရာအင်မတန်မှအောင်မြင်မှုကျွန်တော်တို့တရှင်ထုံးရောက်လာခဲ့တယ်လို့ပြောလို့ရတယ်ဆိုတော့တပြည်လုံးအတိုင်းအတာအနေနဲ့ပြောရရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဖက်ကအင်အားပို့ပြီးတော့အားကောင်းလာတယ်လို့တိုက်ရိုက်ခိုက်ရင်လည်းပို့ပြီးတော့အားကောင်းလာတယ်လို့ပြောလို့ရတယ်။မြေပြန့်ဖက်မှာဆိုရင်လည်းဒီ PDF ဒီကတိုက်ရိုက်ခိုက်ရင်လည်းလက်နဲ့အင်အားပို့ပြီးတော့တိုးတက်လာတယ်လို့ပြောလို့ရတယ်။စစ်ကောင်စီအနေနဲ့ထားကြတော့ဒီထိုးစီကနဲ့ခံစီအနေထားကိုရောက်သွားတယ်လို့ပြောလို့ရပါတယ်။ဆိုတော့အဲ့ဒါစီရဲ့အနေထားနိုင်ငံရဲ့အနေထားကြတော့လေဒီနေ့အထိစစ်ကောင်စီကသူပြောနေတဲ့ဒီရွေးကောက်ပွဲဆိုတဲ့ဟာဘယ်လိုမှအရာထင်ခဲ့တာမဟုတ်ဘူးအခုထိပြီးတော့ပြည်သူလူထုရဲ့ထောက်ခံမှုလုံးဝတနေ့ထက်တနေ့ဆုပ်ယုပ်လာတာကိုတွေ့ရတယ်ဆိုတော့ဒီစီရေးမှာတော့လကောင်းနိုင်ငံရေးမှာတော့လကောင်းစစ်ကောင်စီကလုံးဝအကြက်ဖက်ကိုရောက်နေတယ်လို့ပြောလို့ရတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့သူကတော့ဂျာနာအနေထားရောက်သွားပြီဆိုတော့ဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့တွန်းနေမှာပဲဒါပေမဲ့သူကယုံလေနစ်လေယုံလေကျွန်းလေအဲ့ဒီအနေထားကိုရောက်သွားတယ်လို့အဲ့ဒါကြောင့်စီရေးနိုင်ငံရေးကကျွန်တော်တို့ဖက်ကအသာစီးရနေတယ်လို့အဲ့ဒါလိုပဲကျွန်တော်ပြောချင်တယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ ဟုတ်ကဲ့အဲ့ဒါနဲ့တစ်ဆက်တည်းဒီစစ်ကောင်စီကတော့ဒီ January February တရက်မှာအာဏာသိမ်းတဲ့3နှစ်ပြည့်မယ်အဲ့ဒါကနဲ့သူကတော့ဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့အာဏာဆက်ကင်သွားမယ့်အနေအထားမှာရှိနေပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့သူ့ရဲ့လုပ်ငန်းစဉ်တွေရှေ့လုပ်ငန်းစဉ်တွေစီးရဲနိုင်ငံကြီးတစ်ခုမှအောင်မြင်မှာမဟုတ်ဘူးအဲ့ဒီအနေအထားကရောက်ရှိနေတယ်ပြီးတော့အဲ့ဒါကစီးရဲနိုင်ငံရေးထက်တွက်လို့မရဘူးပြည်သူလူထုရဲ့အနေအထားကြီးလိုက်ရင်ပြည်သူလူထုကဒီစီးပွားရေးလူမှုရေးဖက်ဆုံးကြတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့အဲ့ဒါကိုပြည်သူလူထုကပို့ပြီးတော့စစ်ကောင်စီအပေါ်မုန်းတီးတဲ့စိတ်ကပို့ပြီးတော့ပွားလာတယ်
In this sessions, we are going to discuss about the security affairs and the territory control of the armed resistance forces in Myanmar. Dr. Mimi Wimbat is an adjunct fellow of the East-West Center, and David Madison is an independent analyst. Dr. Mimi Wimbat, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you provide an overview of the current security situations and the territory control of the armed resistance forces?
Sure. Before I answer that question, I have to say a little bit of disclaimer. You know, all the comments and assessment that I will be providing today is my own. I'm not representing U.S. government or any other organization. So I just want to say that. As for the security situation, well, the latest information that we're getting from the ground is, the military has less than half, to be conservative, less than half the country under its control, and especially all the periphery really are they have lost control of the country. So that's one, and then two is the reason they are in a teetering on a edge is because of their experiencing high level of defection. And what we're seeing even lately has been unit level, entire unit defecting, right? So that is really an important development. And the people support, they still have the rejection of the people. And right now, as we speak, the silent strike is going on and the country is quiet, but their voice is loud and clear that they still reject the military. And the latest data I saw was saying 92% of the country still experiences some level of armed eruption against the military. So, overall, I would say the military is teetering on the edge, and the resistant forces have gained a lot in recent weeks and months. Yeah.
David Madison, I think you agree with that, Mimi Wimbat. And now the resistance forces have been gaining victories in battle, particularly after Operation 1027. What are the main factors contributing to these victories?
Well, I think with Operation 1027, one of the major factors there, I would think, is first secrecy. It came as a surprise to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And secondly, it really shows the power of long-term planning and actually bringing a lot of allies in. And I think in retrospect, looking at how the Three Brotherhood Alliance built up friendships and alliances and trained and worked with the BPLA, Mong Songkhar's Burma People's Liberation Army, and then the PLA and the Mandalay PDF. And I think that kind of shows that long-term planning really pays off. And I think another success was that it coincided with the Chinese wanting to crack down on these scam centers along the border. So that there was a kind of a fusion of really effective planning and training and alliance building with a good bit of luck when it comes to timing. And I do think we're seeing that in other parts of the country, that there's a lot more cooperation going on between ethnic armed organizations many of whom predated the coup, and some of the newer formations and people's defence forces. And I think that really accounts for a lot of the success.
Yeah, I agree with what David said, actually. I would say the three things: timing, like you said, surprise, and joint command. They didn't really have a chain of command, but they show how joint command can also bring the unity of command into the fight. So those are the three elements, I think, that David has said. I really agree with him. And one of the things is the timing. They have been very patient because they have received a lot of criticism for not being a part of the fight, not joining the fight. So it would have, if they're not disciplined and patient, they could have joined too early, but they waited. The timing is really right on the mark, right? And then they were able to utilize the opportunity rising on the China side, on their interest of those scam center, and they were able to integrate it into their operation. So yeah, to me, and in the OPSEC was really, really good. So that's those three things: timing, OPSEC, and joint command were the three, I think, elements that really deliver the success. But also, I just want to say one more. The timing also is related to over nearly 3 years of other groups chipping away at the military, right, the junta forces. So they are fatigued, and that's when they strike. So if they had the same operation earlier, it may not have the same level of success. But the fact that the other groups and the PDFs are also chipping away at the military over nearly 3 years, and then when they strike, that's why they were able to be this successful. Yeah, but they came at the right timing, though. As everybody else is getting fatigued, this really re-energized the entire movement and everybody else. Yeah.
Sounds exciting, and but there are some concern about the EAOs or ethnic organization. They were hot. They halted this, make a ceasefire with the China, facilitating the ceasefire agreement. So do you see any potential threat there? Where they stop fighting after gaining recognitions and guarantees of their autonomy over plain territories? And David, please.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say about the Chinese brokered ceasefire is that I think the currency of ceasefires in Burma, really isn't very valuable. We've seen this from the NCA, which was falling apart years ago, and I think is in utter shreds now with the PNLO leaving. And this Chinese sponsored talks, I think, really was just some kind of window dressing to please Beijing and to try and get the sides together. I think the Three Brotherhood Alliance realised, we're setting our own timetable. We're not doing anything. We just we're meeting basically just to assuage China's concerns. And I don't think China really expects too much from it, really. And if you look at events in Rakhine State, the Arakan Army are on their own timetable. They held on to that ceasefire as much as they could to kind of build up their forces and wait for the right moment. And they're not going to do anything to endanger that. I do think there's always a fear that the SAC, that the Myanmar military will divide and rule and start picking apart some of the EAOs, using that kind of very early 1990s or post-1989 strategy of just coming up with these kind of stand-fast agreements and kind of, basically trying to reduce the amount of enemies that they have. But I would say that I think that the conflict situation is beyond that. And I think that that's because there are so many different groups who are like, no, this is a fight to the end. The military's got to go. And I do think that there's an unprecedented... You've got to remember, in 1989 and the early 1990s, that came after decades of civil war, and a lot of communities were absolutely exhausted, and the country was opening up, especially to China. So the timing was right. I don't think the timing is right for that kind of divide and rule tactic right now. One thing I do think that we should be very careful about is that a lot of EAOs are not necessarily thinking nationally in their vision. they're actually kind of thinking, we're not going to be the ones to march on Naypyidaw. We don't necessarily have that much appetite for a more nation-level military operations. What we're actually trying to do is fight in our areas and encourage and assist in any way that we can in other areas. And you've got to kind of adapt your tactics and your overall strategy accordingly. And so I do think we shouldn't see any kind of downturn in fighting as necessarily the SAC managing to pick some of these groups apart. I think one thing that you can really tell is that the leadership of the SAC is just absolutely clueless when it comes to developing a strategy to deal with the revolution. I think a lot of us who've been following Myanmar for a long time are kind of thinking, why don't they do this? Why don't they release Aung San Suu Kyi? Why don't they kind of pick some of the groups apart? And Min Aung Hlaing seems to be absolutely mentally obtuse to any kind of strategy in dealing with this. And this morning I was reading through the minutes of the National Defence and Security Council speech, which I really urge everyone to read because I think it gives you an insight into Min Aung Hlaing's delusion. And he's admitting all of these military failures, all of these setbacks. And I think an overall message is that he's admitting that he absolutely has no plan in how to address this.
Thank you. Dr. Mimi Wimbat, what are the potential future scenarios? Is the Tatmadaw stay far from defeated? What do you think?
Well, the defeat is, when that's going to happen is hard to predict. Hard to predict because there's so many moving parts. There's so many dependent variables in there. But what we know is we can tell you, David is absolutely right. Min Aung Hlaing does not have any strategy. He doesn't have exit strategy. He just cutting and pasting from the 1990s or 1950s manual and hoping that they will work. But the thing is, the operating environment has changed. Have transformed. One, ICT, information communication technology, is not like 1988, right? The people are more open, they are more connected. So all these things change, and he can't seem to grasp that, right? And the people around him seems to be afraid to tell him what he needs to hear because, off with the head type of thing. So he is not getting all the information he needs to draft a really coherent strategy. So that's why it is where it is. And it is more on I've said the victory is dependent on how the resistant coalition is able to coalesce more. More they're able to do that, I think that's where the victory is. So I always say the victory is in the hand of the resistant, not so much on the Min Aung Hlaing side. And David was saying they will march to Naypyidaw. But one of the things is they don't have the logistics, right? They can't project their forces. In order for you to project your forces out of your territory, you need logistical chain, and they don't have that. So that's why they can support and assist. But I think that's good enough. It's actually good enough because as you see, all the PDFs are getting more experience. They're increasing their capability. And the thing is, defection is so bad, the morale is so bad. It's not about, you don't need firepower at this moment. You can do psychological operation. If you have a really good, coherent and consistent psychological operation, you can get to everybody to surrender. Actually, Min Aung Hlaing may not surrender, but you need foot soldier. You need, I call it trigger pullers, for you to have a fight. So those are the elements. But I can't tell specifically when it will happen. But I don't think it will take very long.
David, and then so we have a short period, and it was a few minutes, couple of minutes. And do you think the resistance forces will knock the door of a Min Aung Hlaing?
I think they've been knocking on the door of Min Aung Hlaing for quite some time now.
Yes, right.
He's just not home. He's not there to actually answer the door because he's so completely out to lunch. If he was kind of more aware of the threat, I think he'd be acting in very different ways. And I agree with Sayamar that the military has been significantly weakened. And a reliance on air power, I think, is a losing strategy. And I think increasingly you're looking at the Myanmar Air Force bombing civilians, trying to bomb the insurgents, and trying to bomb their way out of this. But you've got to put boots on the ground and actually retake territory and then administer them. And I think in the long term, that attrition is really going to affect, as Sayamar said, morale, but also combat effectiveness, which we're starting to see dwindling. I would say that the end. I actually think that the end is inevitable. I think that the military is finished in the long run. I just don't know how long that run is going to be, and I do think we should be concerned about the effect on the civilian population. We're already seeing in various towns that the military is expelled from, and then they just bomb it to oblivion, destroying marketplaces. So I think that's something we should be aware of, that the civilians are really taking a very, very heavy toll during this.
Thank you very much, David Medicine and Dr. Mimi Wimbat.